Hey everybody, how's it going? Hope you're doing okay. Taking this a little early, a lot going on in my family right now. My stepmother is actually has been going had a lot of health issues, so I've been trying to find time to actually um tape this lecture. But it's an important one because it deals with the oral presentations. I'm also supposed to be getting a tooth implant on Saturday. Maybe it's a little too much information, but might affect my ability to speak and talk and that sort of thing for a few days. So um anyway, so I wanted to use this time to actually talk about the oral presentations because it's important. Obviously, it's a big chunk of your grade. And I believe, I'm sorry, I should have this up. It's about 30%, I believe. So the overall grade. So um anyway, so it actually we should just check the syllabus on that one. But anyway, um, this is actually the part where basically you really take whatever we've learned in the book and elsewhere, and really kind of learn how to apply it and become that editor, that person in the newsroom that I've talked about being, um, where you have to actually like sit there and make a decision. And it's not just the newsroom, but like I said, maybe it's like a TV show. And by the way, I'm sorry. Yes, the oral presentation is 30% of your grade, um, your overall grade. So anyway, um, so this is the opportunity to basically, like I said, you're in a production room, or whatever, and you have to make a decision on whether to actually produce something, uh, you know, make news about whatever, and you have to weigh the ethical issues that may be involved, and they could actually impact, the bottom line, which is, I had a friend of mine who once guest spoke at one of my classes, and he basically kept asking people. This is when they actually had real newspapers, right? He said, "What's the purpose of a newspaper?" And everybody kept saying to inform and educate and that sort of thing. And then he's a very cynical guy. He said, "Well, no, the purpose of a newspaper is to make money." So what he's basically trying to say is that this is a capitalistic business, and basically people are trying to make money. So you always have to take that consideration whenever you come across some sort of decision that's ethical, because you have to do remember that it is actually a business, and sometimes like people cross those lines, those ethical lines, to make the money. Um, but the good question that to be asked is, like, I think, is that we've seen things that, like, I used to do when I, like, 10 years ago, when the Jersey Shore TV show was on. I had people make both arguments that the Jersey Shore is an example of something that's ethical, and then other people make an example, talk about how it's not ethical. And one of the things I raised was, like, what kind of a staying power does this have? You know, we see TV shows like The Office and shows like that you could argue are ethical because they're well made and they're quality, and sometimes they do actually cross maybe boundaries they shouldn't, but and even like Friends, that sort of thing, but they're good quality. They're not necessarily tasteless, that sort of thing, and they have staying power probably because for that reason. I mean, how many times? I mean, I know Jersey Shore does, like, what, vacation and whatever they do, but how often do you see like reruns of the Jersey Shore? That sort of thing. So, you take that into consideration. Like, does it have? Because sometimes, like, you know, uh, any kind of media production that actually does have staying power is usually because it meets some sort of ethical standard. It's like, how many times can you look at, like, the Jersey Shore band and deal with their drinking and their craziness and their punching and their fighting, and just say to yourself, I mean, is this something I really need to, like, relax myself, 5, 10 years later when I'm watching in reruns? No. So um anyway, so the big thing is that if I had to do this all over again, I think I mentioned this, is that I would have actually had the exam earlier, a midterm exam earlier, because I think that the way I had it was not right. I should have actually had it during the warning period. I'm not anticipating people. There was a warning grade I did issue, but it was for the discussion points, which almost excellent participation in that, but almost. But I don't expect there to be a lot of issue with the midterm exam. If I feel like there is an issue, I'll let you know. Okay. With your performance, that sort of thing. but I would have actually had it before spring break if I had to do it all over again. So I apologize for that. And then I would have assigned this oral presentation after spring break. So because of the situation, I want to make sure you have enough time. And because I scheduled the midterm exam a little bit too late, I'm actually going to assign the oral presentation now. And then your deadline will be more than a month from now. So now you'll have the benefit you'll get from this is you'll have even more time to do this. So let's look at what we got here. So like I said, I'm doing this lecture before Monday. So, this stuff isn't posted yet. But it's under assignments, and I'm sorry, this is taking a long time. We read all the chapters. That's good. That'll be on your midterm exam. And of course, next week we'll have our midterm study guide that'll be given out. All this stuff hasn't been posted yet. So anyway, the oral presentation, what you're seeing posted is the oral presentation ideas. So the oral presentations will be done individually, and you need to present your idea proposal to this entry by March 9th, okay? And then I have to approve it, okay? So that's how we're going to start. Like I said, if I had to do this all over again, I would have done this later, but I'm doing it now. So you have until basically, once you have that idea, and I'll probably approve it very soon, as soon as possible, within, obviously, days or if not the week after March 9th. Then you have until April 17th to submit this to the separate assignment entry, which will be posted after all the assignments are approved for the oral presentation. Okay. Now this actually has like a guide on basically how to handle the oral presentation. It also has an example of an oral presentation that went well. Okay. But what it also has is basically the guide right here to the oral presentations, which is this link right here. Okay. So let's go to that right now. As you can see right here. Here are some of the guidelines for the oral presentation, which will be due April 17th. There's assignment entry for that. Please present the ideas to me in a sentence or two by March 9th. There is a separate entry for that. So we are going to do these individually, and you need to film yourself. You could do that, do what I do, which is use Zoom. However you want to do it is fine, but it has to be some sort of a video. Present to me in however way you want. You could like just send me the video. You can send me the YouTube link or some other link to some other service. That's fine. Okay. You need to pick a media item that raises ethical questions and ultimately decide, were they ethically right or wrong? I mean, I brought up like TV shows as an example. Was that an ethical idea to actually use that as something for the public to use and consume? You know, or you may even have a mixed view. Maybe there's like something ethical about it and something that's not. You know, like I said, I had people who have presented both the ethical side of Jersey Shore, and I had people presented the not ethical side of Jersey Shore, two different groups, and they both got A's. So, you know, that's basically what we went for. Now, you need to pick a specific topic, not just a broad one like cable news, okay? But maybe something along the lines of like maybe like one specific like place like Fox News or MSNBC and how they like the news, and maybe like how they handled one particular news item, whether it was like a shooting or whatever, something like that. You have to be a little more specific than that, so it's not just so broad, and that would be very hard to deal with because, you know, because that's like almost writing a whole chapter as like the 24/7 cable news channels. All right, so you want to basically have something that goes step by step and showing why it's ethical, and you may structure your presentation how you like, but a lot of people do use the Potter's box that I talked about. Remember the Potter's box? And they run them through the Potter's box. Why basically, remember, it was the you have to identify your idea essentially. Okay. Let's actually go to that right now. The module that actually dealt with that. Remember that was week 2. The study of ethics. Okay. So you have the empirical definition, which is identifying the problem. What is the potential ethical dilemma in this particular media production, whether it again be like straight news, TV news, whatever, or maybe like a TV show or whatever. Okay. Then you identify your values. That's the gut check. What's your personal values that have been raised with? How do you personally feel about it? What maybe gives you pause or not about this particular production? Okay. Appeal to ethical principles. Again, that's the ancient Greeks and Romans, etc., Germans and everything, who basically came up with the guiding principles like Aristotle and that sort of thing that are still used today to basically determine what's ethical and what's not. Okay, in daily life that are applied to the media. Okay, the golden mean, social contract, that sort of thing. Okay, choose loyalty is where you basically decide, is there anything that I'm doing in this that actually could conflict in my decision making? I mean, like, is there anything that basically like personally affecting me, or maybe personally affecting my own personal loyalties, that could stand in the way of making my decision? Is it something based on emotion? You want to use something that's as objective as making as objective as decision as possible. Okay, and then you ultimately come to your decision. Okay, so you could go through that whole process if you want. Okay. All right, so let's go back to the, yes. Okay. Please use fact-based opinions from critics, commentators, philosophers, or any learned people to back up your analysis. So like, the structure could be basically this: state your problem like you would an opinion, okay, which is going to be the way I want to see your exam answers appear to be. Okay, you basically state your opinion and how you feel about it, but back it up by using like a real life example, or maybe like an ethical principle that's out there or something. And basically something that's grounded in reality that basically can help back up your argument. Okay. And I'll be showing you an example, and you can even use statistics if you want to. Okay. It's highly recommended that this is what I do. Maybe use an opposing point of view and argue away against it. That's actually a good way of actually kind of like, in addition to the Potter's box, and really trying to just basically prove somebody wrong so you can prove yourself right. I think that's actually an effective layer to add to your argument. Okay. So basically, if you were to say like, well, say that the Jersey Shore was an ethical way and you disagree with it, why, this is how they feel. They feel it's ethical because it makes money, and they feel like it's an accurate representation. But actually, most people who live at the Jersey Shore do not like drink and get stupid. And here's an example of like typical life at the Jersey Shore, that sort of thing. Okay. Each student will have 10 minutes maximum for the presentation. Okay, so it's just 10 minutes. That's it. Okay. Discussion points will be raised, and I will ask you. I ask that you engage. So I will actually. What you're going to do is actually there's going to be discussion points raised. So I'm actually going to skip discussion points this week, so you can get basically focused on this, and then your midterm, or you can basically not reintroduce discussion points until the oral presentations come back. And we're going to be using those discussion points as fodder for your final, which will be based on the stuff that you'll see in the oral presentations. Okay, so your final exam will be based on general issues raised in oral presentations. We'll discuss those in lectures beginning April 17th and before the May 1st final. Okay, I will supply the links and access to oral presentations I've chosen from your submissions that'll be relevant to your final exam questions. So basically, I'll be showing you, that'll be part of your homework. I'll be to look at these. I won't show you every oral presentation from everybody in class, but just from a select few. And you can look at those and then basically use those as fodder for your answers to, it'll be similar. It'll be 5 questions like the midterm that'll be on your final. Okay. And then they'll use those presentations presented to each of you so you can review them. We'll advise on that, of course. Okay. So, all right. So that's basically what you need to do. But your first thing to do here is basically March 9th is to come up with an idea. Okay. So, I mean, there's so many things out there. Like I said, there's like TV news, there's stuff in TV news, there's stuff in like TV shows, there's stuff in newspapers, stuff in news articles, there's stuff that like the way like people conducted their business and how they presented the news, that sort of thing. I have an example right here, actually. And what I did was actually put this in YouTube form of my own, basically showing how this particular thing was done in a PowerPoint presentation. Okay, so let's watch that right now. How about that? Okay. Again, everybody. Oh boy, I rushed to that one. I meant to actually show you guys a typical presentation. This one's actually from a long time ago. This show's not even way left around anymore. But so anyway, this short little video is an add-on to the first one. We'll deal with that a little bit.
I guess
Yes, I know. There's some stuff in there that was relevant to whatever I was discussing in the class at the time. I probably should have cut that out, but
just wanted to show you that basically it's not something that's like overly complicated. Which I'm not asking for something overly complicated. Is what I'm saying. Okay. So let me get to this one. It's about this show called The Cleveland Show. That was around like 10 years ago. Okay. And let's see here. So let's get to this. Okay. So basically, you had essentially this presented as a PowerPoint presentation. Okay. And what you had essentially is like the Potter's box. You essentially like define the issue. This particular group felt that it was an unethical portrayal of Black culture. And I'll be posting this too, just to give you an idea. It gave some background, which is important. Present some context here. You know how it came about. It came from the show Family Guy. Follows the misfortunes of Cleveland Brown, former Family Guy sidekick. It says here. Then it showed a picture of the different characters and the people behind them. Actually, it's important because it also shows whose voices essentially are behind. And this is one of the important points made right here. Said they felt that a white person doing a Black person's voice was unethical and maybe even racially charged. The idea there was actually show that like how back up your own opinions by having other people, as I explained before, back up your opinions. Okay. And they took the tack, as I talked before, about trying to show that like there was an opposing argument here. Perhaps consider imaginative and creative. But my idea here was to work against that here. So, is it an ethical or unethical to use Caucasian actors to depict African American characters? So that was one of the big issues they raised. Okay, they felt it was unethical to use white actors to portray Black African American characters because they feel that not having African American characters or having African Americans with diverse backgrounds can relate to the role. Not present a stereotype representation, and too often it leads to an insensitive portrayal to have somebody, a white actor, do a black person's voice. And what they did was they actually this is what I'm saying is they actually went to people to back up their own opinions. In this particular case, it was the New York Times. It was like one Black dude in each class, and he remembers how it was.
that's the grounded example I've talked about to use to back up your argument is to maybe use something from the New York Times commentary or something like that, the ethical principle, that sort of thing. Of course, having more than one will help bolster your argument. Obviously, no requirement there on how many examples, but I would suggest that you have more than one. And here's a New York Times commentary piece on it.
And basically, they quoted him, and they quoted how this guy who was actually the voice actually basically kind of stepped in his own fee here basically by saying that like he based it on people he knew who showed some sort of bad Black stereotype of and as opposed to actually like being sensitive and real and getting as close to the truth as possible. He based his stereotype on he based his voice of Cleveland on a stereotype. Okay. So actually, as you can see here, what's the problem? Basically, so they use the empirical definition. So there actually is like the Potter's box in here, okay? Identify your values, okay? So these again the personal gut check. So pigeonholes the African American community. So this particular group had these personal feelings, again, what you're born with, what you're raised with, as to why they opposed the way this is being portrayed. Again, the hypersexualization of characters, and again, they used like other people's opinions to basically back that up. This particular group, progressive.com. Okay. All right. Okay. Now, ethical principles. So, they went with the golden mean, balance stereotypes with positive qualities of African Americans. So, if you have basically Mike Henry's portrayal was actually based on a stereotype, which is considered bad. So that's not applying with the golden mean. Applying the golden mean because the golden mean may essentially be the center of things. By going with a stereotype, you're going with the extreme representation of it. Okay. They also talked about the utilitarian theory. Okay. potential outcome, Fox Debut, and again, going to another source. What you do, you source it to back up your opinions. Fox Debut, the Cleveland show, is nothing more than a desperate and stealth attempt to work against the improved international image of Black people. Okay. Again, how social contract was to be gained, this interaction. Okay, let's keep that. Determine loyalties. Well, again, they have loyalties, advertisers' reputation. One thing to keep in mind.
So it's not just personal loyalties, but it's also basically the loyalties of the people who are doing a production. You're taking that into account, really. It's actually mainly that, like what could affect what they do and who are they loyal to, and does that play a role? You know, loyal to the money, of course, but I mean, who else is influencing their decision, and is that a factor? You know, good or bad or indifferent in your overall decision, how you feel.
Mine also is that there's always some sort of money thing here. You know, when you determine loyalty, that's like probably one of the first things when you determine loyalty is like there's a loyalty to money, to making money. So they have to actually find a way to like, okay, so we live in a capitalist society, as much as maybe people don't like it, that's what we do. So when they actually develop these programs and everything, part of the thinking is this going to make money? You know. So so you can argue all the things in the world and everything, but how does it, so, you know, what is the end game though? The end game in programming is not necessarily to be ethical, it's to actually make money. So, but how can maybe that thought work against the idea of making money? The idea that maybe the ethical problems are too much, that it works against that. And actually that's one of the usual things that comes up is that we've seen this with some programs on Fox News and everything, is that if the content is considered too sensitive and it's considered too offensive, it's the advertisers who back out first usually. Okay, so that's something to take consideration when you try to determine loyalties. There is that, okay, so it's unethical and maybe it's making money right now, but is it going to ultimately end up doing that? Is it going to be something that's going to work well from a business standpoint when advertisers finally reject it? Make a decision. So another thing, and this especially would not work now because we've seen this now. We've seen like people finally recognize that maybe the things people say and the things people do, comedians, that sort of thing, whatever. Actually, a lot of the things that have been said for a long time, reinforcement of stereotypes, people are recognizing now that's not good, and advertisers are backing out and that sort of thing. So they're, you know, the ultimate decision to actually get rid of these things that actually reinforce bad stereotypes. So make a decision, is unethical to use white actors to render black characters. Perpetuate stereotypes is not all ethical principles. Loyalties are everyone but the populations it represents. And then that's another thing too, is that many African Americans would be offended by it. Perhaps there'd be some backlash against advertisers and the network. Okay. All right. Anyway, I wanted to go over that one more thing. I'm sorry I didn't go over before. So anyway, I'll be adding this.
Okay, so that's a demonstration. I thought, why not just repeat it instead of just doing it a different way. And then of course, like I said, that actual PowerPoint and that video are actually included in the assignment entry right here. Okay, there's the PowerPoint. Okay. And I thought I also would show you, of course, I have this here too, but let's just show you an old presentation that went well. The Netflix show You is an unethical depiction of stalking. So there's your empirical definition right there. And let's see how they approach this problem. You can see they actually went about 10 minutes. You can see, I mean, really, like, they really need to go on 15-20 minutes. That's long. Okay. So let's go with this.
Hello, my name is Jamie Halter, and I did my project on the Netflix show You is an unethical depiction of stalking. So just to introduce the first two characters, or the main characters I'm mostly going to be talking about during the presentation. In the back is Joe Goldberg, the main character, and our narrator. And in the front is Guinevere Beck, who is his love interest and also is the one who ultimately gets stalked. So just to begin, what is the show You? So some background is just the Netflix show. It is based off of two novels, You and Hidden Bodies by Carolyn Kepnes.
Obviously, when you want to like show what you're showing, you probably want to go into some description of what it is. You don't want to leave people hang. There's so many shows out there right now. I mean, I never even had heard of this show myself. So giving some background on what it is and what it's about and who's involved is a good idea.
This was originally on Lifetime, but it moved over to Netflix, and that's where it really gained popularity. Season 1 takes a look into Joe Goldberg's life as a bookstore clerk in New York City. Here's where he meets Guinevere Beck, his dream girl. This crush develops into something more, and Joe will do anything for Beck. But he doesn't know much about her. He just is very infatuated and just wants to keep seeing her, and kind of becomes really, really controlling in trying to make her life better from his perspective. And yeah, he begins stalking her every move, kills people who get in the way. He breaks into her house before they even really get to know one another. Sorry. He gets access to her laptop and phone along with her messages, so he can see if they're talking about him and if she's talking to anybody else. Yeah, he has tracked her down so that she would have run-ins with him, and he would, be the knight in shining armor. Romantic, right? But the problem with this show is the romanticism and normalization of stalking. So the show is fixated and in the perspective of the stalker. Through a redemption arc and backstory, audiences sympathize rather than addressing the issues that he has. And the normalization of stalking with the virality of this show and how popular it has become across all ages, all platforms, it's even developed memes as well. It has led to the normalization of stalking, or joking about it, rather than the indicating signs of being stalked, or red flags, as many know. And I got this quote from an article that had a lot of discourse about the show as well, and how a lot of people are romanticizing him rather than seeing him as what he is, a stalker and a dangerous person. He manages at first to keep up the pretense of being the kind of guy who's pursuing a normal, breezy romance with Beck. The warning signals, as in any other abusive, dangerous relationship, are there, but Joe covers his tracks and gaslights Beck into thinking he is the best and only option for her.
This is the power of persuasion here. So why do I want basically people to cite other people? Well, because just having yourself espouse opinions, that's the soapbox. But having somebody actually maybe who can agree with you and back you up in an intelligent way, and basically somebody who's actually a respected opinion, that sort of thing, who's a respected journalist or whatever, a critic. I mean, that just bolsters your argument, gives more credibility to it. So.
And that's from Jessica Barrett, who again wrote the article, and she had really great points. So I just put these two photos next to each other just to show a comparison. On the left is John Hinckley Jr., and he is a famous stalker. He was obsessed with Jodie Foster and also had a plan to kill Ronald Reagan. And this is what real life stalking looks like when it goes too far. And then in the other photo is Joe, the main character. As you can tell, he is a very typically attractive man, almost like a tall, dark, and handsome type of trope. And he does crazy things, and people excuse that because he's attractive or he's misunderstood as they perceive him. So identifying the values. So the values being perception by audience and toxic behavior. So the perception by audience, the lack of criticism towards Joe and how many see him as not being so bad despite his actions. And those are very violent and dangerous actions. Toxic behavior, between the killings of loved ones, accidents, and control, Joe is consistently gaslighting his victims, especially in the case of Beck. It is not shown in the perspective of a victim, and as a viewer, you become very immune to his toxicity because you're almost following him around and seeing what he's doing, and it just seems normal because it's just how he is. So, appeal to ethical principles. Caught in the categorical imperative, so you should act as if the maximum of your action were to become through your will a universal law of nature, or we should make ethical decisions as if we are creating laws or rules that everyone should follow. This does not apply to you. You isn't following this imperative just because everybody is watching as this is happening, and it's nothing that anybody should follow or emulate at all. And also, I wanted to discuss Rawls' veiled ignorance. So, people should consider the effects of their behavior from the point of view of everyone involved. again, the show and Netflix and how they put it out, it's not really thinking about how people will perceive it, as they kind of wanted to have this like inner crisis as a viewer, but instead of having just that debate within yourself, you are thinking about him and how maybe he's misunderstood. He had a bad life, he's been through a lot. And also John Stuart Mill and utilitarianism. So everyone should act in a way that will produce the greatest good for the greatest number. And I mainly use this example because of the copycat suicide that was in the book. And pretty much I see that a lot of people joke and make fun of you and like take everything very lightly when it's a very serious situation, and it could easily be like emulated and copied to other people's advantage, whether it's stalking or, you know. So for this, I also had some examples. So on the left is a rough layout of the glass box, which is located in the bookstore's basement. And that's where Joe puts his victims. In this case, this is Benji, who is Beck's ex-boyfriend. And it has like the rough dimensions of it, what type of glass it is, and just its little nooks and crannies, which is concerning because it's almost like, oh, like this would be how you would build it. And in the other photo, it's a video game known as The Sims, and someone actually recreated the glass box that is where his victims are. So I also just wanted to add the savior complex. The savior complex is a psychological construct which makes a person feel the need to save other people. This person has a strong tendency to seek people who desperately need help and to assist them, often sacrificing their own needs for these. This complex applies to Joe as he is seeking out a girl, in this case Beck, to fix or improve her life by entering it and helping her. The idea that a strong male is romanticized for making something better by their own definition, because everything that he does, he thinks he should be doing. And Beck has no idea about any of this. And a lot of the red flags often are not shown to her. It's just shown to us as an audience. And Joe, as a male with a savior complex, he sees nothing wrong in his visibly controlling actions. He knows they're morally wrong and hides them from people, but to him, he's like, I'm doing the right thing. So, as an audience witnessing his actions with his own denial, you kind of root for him to get better and become a better person and get away from this life of stalking. But that is the premise of the show. So a counter argument, obviously, is you would be an ethical representation of stalking. If you just put the perspective and narration aside, it shows clear indications of abuse and stalking. And not everyone who watches the show is perceiving Joe in a sympathetic way. It's just very prevalent and very, very noticeable that a lot of people view him in a sympathetic way. And the loyalties, obviously, are to Netflix itself. As a streaming platform, they took on the show from Lifetime, so they obviously had a lot of faith in the show, and the show has been extremely popular. Also to its viewers, which in this case isn't really being done justice to. They are very much, you know, they're talking about a very problematic subject, and it can go either or. So, and also the original book series, which obviously Hollywood changes things a lot, and it's very different than the actual book itself, but it may not be doing justice if it's not following along the same lines and is trying to romanticize it. So make a decision. You is an ethical depiction of stalking, as it gives the stalker a redemption arc and sympathy. It romanticizes the stalker. It normalizes creepy behavior. It does not represent ethical principles, and it remains loyal to Netflix to bring in views and does not consider the audience's possible toxic perception and influence. Thank you.
Okay, so just so you know, by the way, you might be a little confused to see when I ask for a video and there's an oral presentation. I'll make clear in the assignment entry that I'm sorry, there's a PowerPoint in the oral presentation that was actually done in an in-person class a while ago. So that PowerPoint presentation. So but what I'm asking you to do is actually do a video. And also so you know that I don't have to agree with your opinion, okay? I just want to see something that's actually put together well. Like I said, I mean, I kind of go back and forth on the Jersey Shore debate. I often feel it's unethical, but I actually gave the people who argue that was ethical an A because I thought that they had a well-founded argument and had enough layers of evidence and everything to back up the argument to put together a strong presentation. So, all right. So that is what's next. That's what's new. Next week we'll be doing the midterm exam review, which will be something you'll be doing when you come back from spring break. Okay. But like I said, I just want to get this out to you so you'll have plenty of time to do it. And we'll be talking about it. And we'll have lots of questions and that sort of thing. Okay. And also I have an extra credit opportunity. One more thing that I also meant to mention. Sorry about that. And this is actually something that lead to a half grade higher on your exam. I consider something to kind of maybe fill the gap between now and also the midterm exam. But basically what I'm asking you to do is to watch the movie All the President's Men. So this will be posted too. And let's get to that. It's under extra credit. All the way through, and basically see that there's a mistake. There was one big mistake made by the two reporters involved in there. Did they make a mistake because they were behaving unethically? What I'm asking you to do is to basically present something that is 500 words. It's due April 3rd, but it's just extra credit, so it's voluntary, okay? But that's to also give you bolster your midterm exam grade and to use it practically as an exam, almost like a big discussion point. So that again, it's optional, but it'll both if I found it's sound and effective your argument, then I will actually give you a half grade higher on your midterm. Of course, if you get an A, then it'll be essentially an A plus. Okay, so all right. So that's it, guys, and that's all I have. And thanks very much, and I'll be talking to you.